You really thought I'd never find out? Clara's voice trembled, not from fear, but betrayal. You weren't supposed to, Grayson whispered, eyes filled with something between guilt and loss. She thought their love was real, until one email showed she was just a backup plan, a plan B, for a CEO trying to save his empire, no matter the cost. The meetings, the smiles, the late-night talks, it was all part of a strategy, and when Clara walked away from it all, he was left with a ring and regret. But what happens when love begins with a lie? What if the one mistake he couldn't undo was the only thing that ever felt real? Don't blink. This story might be the best mistake you'll ever witness. Clara Hayes didn't plan to work that Monday. Mondays were her one day to breathe, to catch up on laundry, paperwork, or just cry in peace without anyone watching. But when her best friend Lila called at 6:15 a.m., voice raspy with a head cold and panic, Clara didn't hesitate. Please, Clara, I can't even speak, let alone take orders. Clara hung up, pulled her aching body out of bed, and threw on her plain black café uniform. No makeup. Hair in a bun. No time to think about the second eviction notice taped to her apartment door or the bill collector voicemail she hadn't returned. This wasn't about her. It was about survival. For both of them. By 8:30, Tamont Cafe was already overflowing with the Monday morning rush. Orders barked, lattes hissed, jazz hummed faintly through the speakers, but the mood was all caffeine and urgency. Clara worked like a machine, balancing cups, scribbling names, and calling out orders with a voice that refused to crack, until her elbow clipped the edge of the counter. Time slowed. The moment she felt the edge of the cup shift, her breath caught. The scalding liquid launched from the brim and splashed directly onto a customer's chest, onto the fine, pristine wool of his dove gray suit. The cafe fell silent. Even the espresso machine seemed to hold its breath. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. Her hands trembled. Napkins. She needed napkins. She grabbed a stack instinctively, but froze, her hand hovering midair. Across the counter stood a man. Tall, stern, his jaw cut so sharp it looked like it had been carved from marble. His neatly parted dark hair didn't move, but his eyes, they narrowed with a cold precision that made her stomach twist. A stain the size of a small plate spread across his chest, the coffee dark against the soft gray fabric. He looked down, then up, slowly, deliberately. "I'm so sorry, sir," Clara said, her voice small but steady. "Please, let me pay for the cleaning." The man didn't blink. "This," he said, biting each syllable, "is a $3,000 suit." His tone was ice, final. He spoke not like someone yelling, but like someone so used to power that he didn't need to raise his voice to destroy. Clara could feel every eye in the cafe on her. Someone had stopped mid-chew. A baby had gone eerily quiet. It was as if the world had frozen to watch her break. But she didn't. Clara took a breath, blinked back the burn behind her eyes, and looked him in the face. "If I could undo it," she said softly, "I would. But I can't. I'm truly sorry." No theatrics, no excuses, just truth. And in that strange, suspended moment, something flickered in the man's expression. His anger, so ready to unleash, didn't come. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his blazer, pulled out a sleek silver business card holder, and placed a single card on the counter between them. He didn't say another word. Then he turned and walked out, past the stunned crowd, through the glass doors and out into the rising sunlight of the street. Clara stood frozen, the card still untouched between them. No apology accepted. No insult hurled. Just a card and a story that had only begun to unfold. Grayson Wolfe sat alone in his penthouse office, high above the heartbeat of the city, staring blankly at the legal document spread across his mahogany desk. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline stretched like a promise he was about to break. 60 days. That's all he had. 60 days to get married, or lose Wolf & Co. known, the empire he'd built from the ground up with grit, sacrifice, and a ruthless kind of brilliance. The clause had been buried in his father's will like a landmine. If unmarried by age 38, full controlling interest shall transfer to the board for strategic merger. Translation: If he didn't find a wife by the end of the fiscal quarter, Wolf and Coens would merge with Everest Holdings, his father's old rival and now a hungry shark circling the company's assets. He had tried. God, he had tried. There had been introductions to heiresses, CEOs' daughters, influencers with millions of followers, and zero real opinions. They laughed too loudly at his jokes. They saw the position, not the person. Not one of them had looked past the title on his business card. Grayson leaned back, hands steepled under his chin, and closed his eyes. And then he saw her. The girl from the café, the one who ruined his suit, the one who didn't stutter, didn't apologize for existing, didn't try to charm him or impress him. Clara Hayes. Her name had been embroidered on a simple black apron. She hadn't begged for forgiveness. She had looked him straight in the eye and taken responsibility with dignity. That moment, strangely, had stayed with him longer than the most expensive dinners or carefully curated profiles. "Monica," he said, tapping his intercom. His executive assistant's voice crackled through. "Yes, Mr. Wolf. I want you to locate someone for me. A young woman, early 20s, works mornings at Timont Café, blonde, apron red, Clara." There was a pause. "Sir, you want me to hire a barista?" "Not hire, not yet. Bring her in. Call it a trial assistant position. A temp. Keep it discreet." Another pause, then, "Understood." Grayson ended the call and sat back again, exhaling. It was absurd, unconventional, possibly even unethical. But it was real. And after years of scripted conversations, public relations masks, and curated romantic candidates, Clara had done what none of them could. She made him feel something that wasn't calculated. He didn't know what would happen. He didn't know if she'd even agree. But for the first time in weeks, the crushing pressure around his chest loosened, just slightly, because something about her, raw, unpredictable, unpolished, felt like the first honest thing in a long time. And when you have 60 days left to fight for your life's work, you start fighting with your gut. Clara hesitated outside the towering glass facade of Wolf & Co., clutching the email in one hand and her nerves in the other. It didn't make sense. No resume, no application. Just a formal invitation to interview for a temporary assistant position. It felt too surreal to be true, but something in her gut urged her forward. She stepped through the revolving doors into a world of sleek marble floors, curated art, and polished perfection. People in tailored suits moved with purpose, voices clipped and measured. Clara, in her borrowed blazer and scuffed flats, felt like a misprint on a glossy page. But when she entered Grayson Wolf's office and saw the man she had accidentally doused in coffee standing behind a polished oak desk, everything clicked into place. He didn't mention the cafe, didn't mention the suit. He simply nodded and gestured to the chair across from him. "Miss Hayes," he said, "thank you for coming." Clara, still trying to process the absurdity of it all, replied carefully, "I'm not sure why I'm here, to be honest." Grayson's eyes didn't waver. "I need someone who can think fast, speak honestly, and who isn't afraid of a title." "You got all that from me spilling coffee on you?" she asked, arching a brow. He smirked faintly. It was a memorable introduction. And with that, Clara Hayes became Wolf & Cohen's newest assistant. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't use flowery language or corporate buzzwords. What she did bring was something that couldn't be trained: integrity, intuition, and a quiet but unshakable confidence. She organized schedules with ruthless precision, called out inefficiencies others ignored. And when Grayson barked at an intern in front of a full team, she didn't flinch. Later that day, in the privacy of his office, she said plainly, "I know you're the boss, but people work better when they feel seen, not small." Grayson had stared at her, stunned. No one had spoken to him like that since his father. But he didn't argue, and surprisingly, the change began to ripple. The atmosphere in the office shifted. Staff began to smile more, greet one another by name. Meetings that used to feel like interrogations became productive brainstorming sessions. Junior employees dared to pitch ideas. Even Monica, his ever-formal assistant, seemed less tense. "Something's different," one of the board members remarked during a quarterly update. "You seem more approachable." Grayson didn't respond, but he knew exactly why. It was Clara. She never lingered after hours unless there was work left undone. She left at 5 sharp every evening to visit her godmother recovering in assisted living. She never asked for favors or shortcuts, and Grayson respected her for it. But one night, after a particularly long day reviewing acquisition proposals, he returned from a call to find Clara curled up on the small couch in his office, head resting on her arm, tablet still glowing beside her, sleep claiming her out of sheer exhaustion. He paused, just watching her. There was something so unguarded about the moment. No titles, no tension. Just a girl trying her best. Quietly, he stepped to the closet, retrieved a soft throw blanket, and gently draped it over her shoulders. His hand hovered above her hair for a moment, then retreated. He turned off the nearby lamp and exited without a word. Unbeknownst to him, someone had seen the gesture through the glass wall, an executive passing by. By morning, the whisper was everywhere. The CEO has a heart, and she found it. The rain poured in sheets that night, drumming a steady rhythm against the glass walls of Wolf & Co. The city outside blurred into streaks of red brake lights and reflections on slick pavement. Most of the staff had already gone home, but Clara Hayes remained, quietly working in the corner of Grayson's expansive office, organizing files for an upcoming board presentation. Grayson had stepped out for a brief call with a late-night investor, leaving his desk unattended. Clara moved to return a folder to his desk and paused when his computer screen lit up. A single unread email sat open, the subject line bold and haunting. Prenup draft, contingency plan B, Clara Hayes. Her heart stilled. She hadn't meant to read it, but her eyes locked before her mind had time to stop them. With trembling fingers, she scrolled. Each line was sharper than the last. Legal terms, clauses, references to a candidate A who had declined the engagement. Then, should primary arrangement fall through, implement narrative with Miss Clara Hayes. Her employment ensures seamless access and public compatibility. She is unaware. Recommend minimal disclosure until formalization. Clara's breath caught. Her stomach turned. Words blurred, but their meaning carved into her chest like a blade. She wasn't here because she was seen. She was here because she was convenient. A solution, not a person. She backed away from the screen like it burned her. Her hand went to her mouth as if to physically keep herself from falling apart. The blanket he'd once placed on her now felt like a cruel gesture. The jokes, the late-night meetings, the moment she thought, just maybe, that something real was growing. All of it shattered. The door opened behind her. Grayson walked in, phone in hand, mid-sentence, then stopped when he saw her standing, pale and frozen. "Clara?" he asked, confused. "What's wrong?" She turned slowly, her expression unreadable, except for the heartbreak in her eyes. "You really thought I wouldn't find out," she said, voice low but sharp enough to cut steel. Grayson's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" She pointed at the screen. "The email, the prenup, Plan B, me." Silence filled the room like fog. "I can explain," he began, stepping toward her. "No," she said, raising a trembling hand. Don't reduce me further by pretending this wasn't calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing." Grayson's jaw tightened. "Clara, it became real. I didn't plan." "But you did." "Boy," she snapped, voice breaking. "You planned everything. I was part of your checklist, a box you needed to tick so you could keep your company. You didn't choose me. You settled for me." He looked like he'd been punched, but she didn't let him speak. "I believed in you," she whispered. "Even when others warned me. I defended you. And all along you saw me as your safety net." She turned away, grabbing her coat and bag. "I don't want your apology. I don't want your empire. I just want out." And with her shoulders straight and tears threatening to fall, Clara walked out into the night, leaving Grayson alone in the ruins of the lie he built. Grayson Wolf had built his reputation on control. Every decision he made was measured, every move calculated. But for the first time in years, he had no strategy, no defense. Clara was gone, and with her, the world he'd carefully constructed seemed to crack open. He didn't sleep. couldn't eat. His penthouse was a silent echo chamber. Meetings were postponed, emails unanswered. The company, once the center of his universe, felt like a shell without meaning. Each morning he returned to the same cafe on Mont Street. He sat at the same corner table where coffee had once spilled, and everything had unexpectedly begun. Baristas came and went. Customers laughed, read, scrolled, ordered. And every time the bell above the door chimed, Grayson's head snapped up, hope flashing, only to fade again. Clara never came. On the seventh day, the ache in his chest turned to clarity. This wasn't just about love. It was about identity. He had used Clara, yes, but more devastating was what that use revealed about himself. She wasn't just his plan B. She was the only person who had ever made him want to be someone better, and he had driven her away. The next morning, he arrived at Wolf & Co. early. The board was scheduled to meet at 9:04 a.m. sharp, expecting updates on the pending merger. Instead, Grayson walked in, not with a pitch deck or a revised strategy, but with a folded letter in hand. He stood at the head of the glass table, his shoulders squared, his voice calm. "I'm resigning." Gasps. A stunned silence rippled across the room like a dropped stone in still water. A silver-haired board member leaned forward. "Is this about the girl?" Grayson met his eyes. "It's not about her. It's about me." "Grayson," another said, "this company is your legacy." "No," he replied, voice steady. "It was my legacy. But legacy without integrity is just ego. Don't be impulsive. I'm not. For once, I'm being honest. I built this empire on numbers, power plays, and silence. I've spent years winning boardrooms and losing myself." Someone scoffed. "You'd walk away from billions. For what? Some barista?" He shook his head gently. "Not for a barista, not for a woman, for the man I want to become. A man who doesn't use people to protect his empire. A man who lets go of something built on lies to rebuild something real." He placed the resignation letter on the table. "Let the merger happen if it must. Let Wolf & Coers belong to whoever values it next. I don't want a crown built on manipulation." Then, without waiting for rebuttal, Grayson turned and walked out. As the boardroom erupted into hushed chaos, he didn't look back. He didn't have a title anymore. No board, no company. Just an empty corner table at a cafe and a woman he might never see again. But for the first time in his life, he felt free. Clara Hayes had always felt safe among books. After the storm that was Grayson Wolf, his charm, his betrayal, and the heartbreak that followed, she found her way back to something steady, something silent. The Commonwealth Avenue Public Library welcomed her with quiet corners and whispered pages. She volunteered during the afternoons, reading aloud to children in the sunlit storytelling room, guiding elderly patrons to their favorite memoirs, and alphabetizing paperbacks with gentle hands. She didn't talk about what happened. Not to her godmother, not to Lila. She let the rhythm of routine fill the empty spaces grief had carved. Some mornings she woke still expecting a text from Grayson. Most nights she fell asleep wondering how a lie could feel so much like love. But each day the ache lessened. She reminded herself she wasn't a plan. She was a person, and she didn't need validation from a man who couldn't see that from the start. One drizzly afternoon, just as the library was preparing to close, Clara stepped outside with a small stack of flyers for an upcoming literacy program. The clouds hung low and heavy, and the scent of wet pavement filled the air. And then she saw him. Across the street, standing beneath a flickering streetlight, was Grayson Wolf, soaked from head to toe. His coat clung to his frame. His hair was no longer perfectly styled, and his eyes held no arrogance, just ache and something else. Hope. He didn't move. He waited for her to see him, and when she did, Clara didn't run, didn't retreat. She stood clutching the damp flyers, her chest tightening. Grayson crossed the street slowly, never breaking eye contact. His usual commanding stride was gone. Each step seemed hesitant, almost reverent. When he finally reached her, neither of them spoke right away. The rain tapped gently on the library awning above them. "I know I shouldn't be here," he said finally, voice raw, "but I needed to say something. Not to fix anything. Just To tell the truth. Clara didn't interrupt. I was scared, he admitted, not of losing the company, but of letting someone in, of letting you in. So I tried to control it, shape it, script it, like everything else in my life. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, weather-worn slip of paper, folded neatly. I kept this, he said, holding it out. Clara hesitated, then took it. It was the receipt, from the morning at the cafe, the day the coffee spilled, and their stories collided. On the back, in his unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "The best mistake of my life." Her breath caught. She looked up at him, eyes glistening, but unreadable. I'm not asking for anything, he said softly. I'm not here to win you back or beg. I just wanted you to know. I left it all. The company, the board, the lie, because I realized the only thing worth keeping was the truth. And you were always the truth. He stepped back, giving her space. If you don't come, I'll understand. You don't owe me anything. I just hope that someday you'll remember that morning. And maybe you'll see what I finally see. Then he turned and walked away, slowly, quietly. He didn't look back. And Clara stood in the rain, holding the receipt against her chest like a fragile thread between past and possibility. Something inside her cracked, not from pain, but from something else, something trying to heal. The next morning, the cafe on Mont Street opened just like any other. The scent of espresso and cinnamon lingered in the air. Jazz played low in the background. The bell above the door chimed softly as customers shuffled in, chasing warmth and routine. But for Grayson Wolfe, this morning was anything but routine. He sat in the same corner booth he'd returned to for days. No laptop, no entourage, just a single coffee cup in front of him, steam curling in lazy spirals. His tailored coat was replaced with a soft wool sweater, his face unshaven, eyes weary, but clear. He didn't glance at the door every time it opened today. He'd made peace with the possibility that she might not come, until she did. The bell rang again, and the world seemed to slow. Clara stepped inside. Her hair was tied back in a simple knot, her coat a soft shade of blue. Her cheeks were pink from the morning chill, and her fingers clutched a small book, perhaps out of habit, perhaps to steady herself. Their eyes met across the cafe. Grayson stood immediately, not out of nervous energy, but reverence, the kind of quiet stillness that only came from someone who had nothing left to hide. Clara walked slowly toward the table. The space between them, once filled with confusion, hurt, and silence, now held something new, understanding. He gestured to the seat. I was hoping you'd come. She gave a small smile. I wasn't sure. Until this morning. He nodded. I wanted to give you something, he said gently, reaching for the plain paper coffee cup in front of him. He handed it to her with both hands. She raised an eyebrow. You're giving me coffee? Just open it, he said, voice soft. Clara carefully lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in a folded napkin, was a small velvet ring box. She froze. Her breath caught. For a moment, the only sound was the soft clink of mugs behind the counter. Grayson dropped to one knee beside the table. The cafe quieted. A little girl near the window gasped. I don't want a wife for business, he said, voice thick with emotion. I don't want contracts. I don't want someone who fits on paper. I want you, for life. He swallowed hard, eyes never leaving hers. You challenge me. You see me. And somehow, even after everything, you still came back. His voice dropped to a whisper. Let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret that. Tears filled Clara's eyes. Her lips parted, but no sound came, just a trembling breath. And then she nodded. Yes, she whispered. A beat. And then the cafe erupted. Applause, cheers. Someone whistled. The barista rang the service bell twice and shouted, Free coffee all day in honor of true love. Ikom. Grayson stood, slipping the ring onto Clara's finger with shaking hands. She looked down at it, then up at him. I guess this really was the best cup of coffee, she said, laughing through tears. He leaned in and kissed her, soft, reverent, full of every apology words could never carry. And in that little cafe, where mistakes once brewed alongside lattes, a new chapter began. Not with perfection, but with truth. In a world driven by contracts, deadlines, and social image, it's easy to forget the power of sincerity. Grayson and Clara's story reminds us that even the most unexpected moments, a spilled cup of coffee, a quiet apology, can lead to life-changing connections when people choose honesty over ego. Too often we judge others by surface impressions or use relationships as tools for personal gain. But real love, the kind that endures, isn't built on strategy or convenience. It's built on vulnerability, accountability, and the courage to admit when we're wrong. For older viewers who have lived through decades of change, this story may echo something familiar. The idea that second chances are worth more than polished plans, and that the heart doesn't retire with age. So here's our question to you. Have you ever let someone go, only to realize too late that they were the truth you never saw coming? Or have you ever been someone's plan B and found the strength to walk away? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this tale stirred something in you, a memory, a tear, or a spark of hope, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Warm Soul Stories. We share stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of what truly matters. Not perfection, but presence. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you in the next story, where love often arrives when we least expect it, but exactly when we need it most.